What's happening, my YouTube friends? Let me get this out of the way here. All right, today we are going to talk about the type of van that I got and kind of some things I did in preparation before I started insulating and the floors. I'm going to talk about maybe my insulation type and where I got it all. It's not hard to find a lot of this stuff. You can find it on YouTube. You can find a lot of these things I got at Lowe's. Yeah, like I say, YouTube was good to me, but Lowe's and Harbor Freight was great to me as well. Those are the three places that work well, with any exception of having to go to electrical wholesaler for some 4-gauge cable ring terminals. The 4-gauge cable, the electrical cable, a lot of that I ordered from Amazon. And I'll get to that when I get to the electrical. But the van I have is a 2020 Ram ProMaster 2500 159 wheelbase. It's not the extended like the 3500. I just didn't see the sense of 14 inches back. I mean, no, it's more than 14 when you look at the overall space of it. The extension is actually pretty cool. I mean, obviously there's something we could have done with that space, but I just didn't see the need for it. Not to mention it's another, $10,000-$12,000 for that 14 inches back. No, I didn't see the sense in that. I just wasn't doing that stuff. So we were not doing that. So it's just something about the ProMasters, man. Out of all the vans I researched, and like I said, I researched this stuff for a long time. The ProMasters just seem to be ideal, the easiest to build. I love the width. I think out of between the Sprinter, the ProMaster, the Transit, and I'm missing the van. Between those three vans, the ProMaster is the widest of them all, believe it or not. I think the Transit is the tallest. And, I just don't know. I mean, on the length, I think the Transit and the Sprinter make maybe the two longest. If you get the longest Sprinter, it's a big van, but God, it's expensive. You're talking probably, if you just get the longest Sprinter van there is, you're probably talking $65,000 or more for that van. Bare bones. I don't know. That maybe might be more. I know Jared Tachi paid somewhere around 52 to, no, not quite. He may have been 48 on his van. He had the 149 wheelbase or 148. You'd have to go watch Jared Tachi's channel to find out on his ProMaster. I mean, on his Sprinter. That's his second build. His first build was a ProMaster, just like this one, which was very cool. And go look at that one, too. He did a great job on that deal. He really did. Him and his dad did an amazing job with the woodwork on that stuff as well. So I think some of these guys are just amazingly talented. But anyway, the ProMaster is cost-wise and everything. The gas mileage, if it's not as heavy, is really fair. It really is. Maintenance would be easier to find than a Mercedes dealership out in the middle of the desert somewhere. You know, think about those things before you go looking for a van. It's easier to find a Ford dealership and a Dodge dealership than there's a Mercedes. The cost of the maintenance, it'll kick you in the butt, man, I'll tell you. And if you get a diesel Sprinter van, those things are made to drive. You can't park those a while, because I'm telling you, if you don't drive those things, man, you'll be spending some money on maintenance that you never thought you would. And it's expensive, I can tell you right now. And do your research on that stuff. Please do when you look at the type of vans that you want to get here. So that's just for me. The ProMasters, I just love them. The way they look and just things about them that I enjoy about it. Just when I built this, I had more of an option to have more living space, not coming in on me without and I have option for cabinets, which I could, but I just love the headroom and the space to be able to do it. I mean, you look over here, it's just a little over 6 feet tall. Someone who's 6 feet tall, just a little over that, can stand comfortably in this thing. It's not a bad deal, you know. This is the van that, you know, the ProMaster is the Winnebago Travados, if you've seen those. The Heimer Actives, you've seen those. The ProMaster is basically a Fiat Ducata. Most of all these European Class B and B plus vans are all Fiat Ducatas over in Europe. In fact, the Winnebago trend that I have is based off those RVs, that style. So that's that European style RV. So, but anyway, that's the van. That's what just really my take on what I wanted out of it. Now, when I got this van back in January, I paid about $36 for it. To give you an idea, it's going to vary. It depends on what you get with the van. There was stuff in this van I had no idea I didn't even want in it, but I got it, and I'm glad I got. I didn't even know, like these lights, I didn't even know that I was getting them. I discovered it, and you'll see in an old video, I was just like, I discovered this silver-looking button, and I thought I was going to unlock something. And all of a sudden, something got brighter. It was these lights. They're bright. Like at night, it brightens this room brighter than this. So, but the panels on the wall, originally I didn't want those black panels. You've seen in my RV, there's those original plastic panels down below. I love them. I just said, I'm going to insulate, and I'm going to put those panels back on, pop those plastic tabs back in, and boom. I'm not cutting any more wood than I have to. I think it saved a lot of time and frustration in this build, and it helped me with a lot of things, being able to get things done. Those original panels are just fine. And if I had some way to, I'll be honest. I mean, if I didn't want to, it covered by plus nuts is the reason why I couldn't do it. And there was something else. But I could have popped those plastic panels, just used them for all my walls. Probably I still would have had to done something for the ceiling, so it would have looked a bit odd. The plus nuts were key to be able to map out and get to those and do that, and go that route. So, be it that I had pretty good options. I had really good options, and the installation process helped tremendously. So, I had those, and then there's small options in this van that I could upgrade. Like I can do the swivel seats. They upgraded my alternator. I had them do that because you go back to an older video I talked about alternators, how important it is. If you build one of these vans and you have a big battery bank in the back, you want a good alternator because you can undertow and burn up that alternator. You could very well catch your van on fire. You have to be very careful about that. Don't underestimate it. Get at least a 220 amp alternator or more. And I mean, I think 220 amp is fine. You don't have to worry about it. But you have to be careful. You have to have a good isolation setup, like a good charge controller or battery isolation relay or something that, and a good, the people don't understand, you just put that relay on there. You need a good, what they call a BMI, some battery monitoring device that regulates that voltage so it doesn't overcharge your batteries, because you can kill a lithium battery real quick. You can damage it. People don't realize it, but you can. Putting too much into it or overrunning it. So you want to be careful on that deal. A lot of these guys go, hey man, I'm not limiting myself. I want to get all the wattage I can have. They're like, slow your roll, man. Just got to be careful about what you're doing on that. You can really kill the life of your battery. So just do all that research. If you don't know, find somebody to help you on anything in this process. Find somebody to help you if you don't know. There's the reason why some people pay a lot of money to have people outfit them for them, and that's understandable. I've met people that had some nice vans that have had them outfitted. And in fact, if you go to Jared Tachi's channel, I walked through her van. He toured a van. The lady's name was Judy, and you'll see it marked from Nomadic Customs. It's a black van. He did amazing woodwork on it, and she has that cruising comfort AC too. They talk about it, so go check that video out. That was the van that really told me last summer, I'm doing this. I'm doing it now. I'm getting everything together, and when I get home, and I'm going to make plans to build a van. And I did. I just have to sell my RV now. But anyway, there was some preparation process. When I got this van, I had to took me a day or two of just getting in it and just kind of going, okay, I've gotten all these notes, and I've got this, now what do I do? And I knew I'd already ordered a bunch of stuff. I ordered the thermal barrier foil insulation and the Havelock wool because I knew that was happening first. I'd gotten like some Gorilla Glue adhesive for the foil thermal barrier. That seemed to work best. That 3M is good and all, but it just doesn't get dry to tack quick enough. And I don't know, it's just too much. That Gorilla Spray, it's that Gorilla Spray adhesive. That works perfectly. And what I advise anybody to do is before you insulate is get like a good 3 or a 10 millimeter, whatever you prefer, closed cell foam foil It's a thermal barrier, noise barrier. If you use that, you don't need rattle trap. You really don't. People, a lot of these guys use rattle trap. I don't knock it. I just didn't think it was needed if I already had that going on. So you'll see my wheel wells have that. And you'll go look at my older videos. You'll see it on the wall. I got it from Amazon. I got a roll of about 200 yards. I can't remember. But if you want to know, particularly just message me or put a message down below or like a comment, and I'll look up and see if I can post the item number. I'll do that. I may try to see if I can get links to those items on here. It's a lengthy process, but I'll try to do that. But I bought that. My insulation over that is wool. I've said it many times. It's sheep's wool from Havelock Wool. Havelock, to me, is probably the only company I know to go with for sheep's wool. It's Havelock Wool. They're out of Reno, Nevada. Great company to deal with. Wool shipping and all probably cost me about $500 or $600 for the wool, and it was about $150, $200 for on Amazon for the thermal. So you're looking at $700 or $800 just to insulate it. You know, it's pricey, but it's worth it. Now, some people will go with the polyiso panels, those styrofoam panels with the foil on both sides. And you know, it's really not a bad idea if you want to do it. But the thing is you've got a lot of crevices that people using that spray foam, and it is annoying as all get out. What you probably could do is do polyiso and just get a little bit of wool and just put the wool around the edges on if you wanted to do that. I mean, it's up to you. Some people just, instead of doing wool, if you didn't want to do wool, that's okay. I tell you what you could do. And I had thought about doing it, but I really wanted to do the wool. Is just double layer that thermal barrier insulation, the foil closed cell foam like I did, and that'll do it, you know. I just think the wool just seemed to be most efficient over the top of it to get the best insulation, but without over-insulating it. I talked about don't over-insulate your vehicle. Make sure you have good ventilation. So the key is the ceiling. You want to make sure that foil barrier, that thermal barrier is on the ceiling most importantly, because that sun bearing down on the roof, that's probably your most important part of the vehicle. You need to put that in. So do your own research. I insulated it the way I felt I need to based on a lot of opinions, a lot of fact of people. And just, I think the common denominator was what works best for you, depending on where you live and what you need. I mean, honestly, there's some people just using that closed cell foam foil or the polyiso and just you know, going with that, you know, they don't care. They just wanted to do that. So anyway, so that was insulation. Insulation was, I don't know, I guess it took me probably about a week to do. And it was a lengthy process, but I got through it. I couldn't finish all the wool until we did the ceilings. The reason being was trying to get it up. But kind of almost before we did the ceilings, I think what would have worked, and I didn't do it, was using the aluminum foil duct tape. That foil tape, that stuff works amazing. And I tell you, when you put the sheep's wool in the places where it will hold in its crevices, on the wall where it'll hold, just use that aluminum foil tape really well and it'll hold it up. 3M makes it. You can get it at Lowe's. I got a roll from Amazon that didn't work as well as the 3M. You can't go wrong with anything 3M. Those guys are phenomenal. From the Scotch tape on up to whatever they're doing, you can't go wrong with it. So I think that'd be the ticket. Just do that. And instead, a lot of people using string to hold up that wool, just that foil tape. Your walls are going to cover it. When you go over the walls, you're just fine, and it'll hold it in place, and it holds the insulation on the wheel wells really well. I've got those taped really well. I think in time I'm probably going to have to tape again on that deal. So I've got some of that foil insulation, some spare left in case I have to use it again. So, but I got most of all that done really. And I think the key was I wanted to do as much of that as I could before I went to my next step, which was with my flooring. We did the flooring, but what I did was, and I think if I can remember, before I even did the insulation, I I did my template for my floor reversed. You know, come to think of it. And I did that before I did anything. So what I did with that is I took 3 or 4 sheets of cardboard, like cardboard boxes, and cut them up. And I made a template for the floor. That template saved us a lot of time when we cut the 3/4 inch plywood for the decking and then everything else. It really helped make the cuts. There was some cuts we had to make. Once we cut them, we had to go shave off a little bit, but a couple of times. It wasn't really like anything major, like I was off. What I had to make sure, and what you need to make sure, is when you put these walls in, you put the floor, make sure you got a little bit of a gap. Make sure there's a gap between each of those plywood pieces for the floor, as well as between the sides of the van, because this thing's going to shift and move, and you don't want it rigid. You don't want any knocking or any squeaking that you can't control. That gap is going to help control every bit of that, so make sure you're doing that. So when I did that template, I took that into account, that there was a gap on that deal. That helped tremendously. So when I had the template and the insulation, we did the flooring. That was our next process. So what I did, we took 3 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. I got a really good pre-sanded plywood because I just did not want to sand anything. But we had a really good belt sander, which it's another tool you need, is a good belt sander when you do this process, because a good sander, a belt sander, is going to help sand those edges and round stuff off. You really will need that. So that's another tool added to my list of tools you're going to need. Another thing you're going to need is a good set of drill bits. I didn't list that, but make sure you get them for that impact wrench I talked about. Get you some drill bits, because you're going to want some that are small enough to do pilot holes. When we put in the flooring for these screws, we had to drill pilot holes smaller than the screw to get it to bite and go in. So all of the screws we use, most of all of them except some of the countersink, we use countersink versions, but we used, if you see that screw on the wall right there, that's most of the screws we used for the trim in the walls was that flat head self-tap. It's a self-tapping or self-drilling screw that's flat for the walls and stuff. But when you did the flooring, and we did furring strips for the cabinets, and a little bit we did for the top parts of the walls, you're going to need a good countersink screw of the same thing, like a good metal self-drilling countersink screw. It'll go through wood and it'll be just fine. So we took three sheets. I hope I didn't say 4, but we took 3 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, pre-sanded, and we took each sheet going this way to each side of the van, not this way. You want the lines to be going across ways, not from front to rear of the van, from side to side, because you don't want these boards dipping inward. We took 3 of them. I took that template. We set them over and lined them up. We drew it out, and we cut it with a jigsaw. And we had 3 cuts. And I have a few adjustments that went right in. Before I did that, I took that foil insulation. I did a couple of layers of that 3mm foil insulation I put on the walls, I put on the floor. Before we put that plywood down, I put that as insulation for the flooring. It helps more than you think. Even though flooring might get cold, it's noise cancellation. It did really well for the road noise. I mean, it's hardly any. It's so quiet when you're riding back here. So and just some insulation. You really want that before you put that 3/4 inch plywood down. Then we laid the plywood down. We started drilling holes. Now, I will tell you that not every screw is going to go in perfectly. It may feel like it's not hitting something, and you have to do another hole. Just put a little silicone down in that hole, bottom and top, and go to the next. You're going to have that, but just be also careful that you adjust the torque, or watch your torque. When you get that torque on 3 on that and you go in, just slow down, because you'll go right through that board and you'll spin that screw out and tear the board up if you don't watch what you're doing. So just be careful. And you really don't need as many screws as you think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably about 9 screws per piece of plywood. I don't even know if we did that many, but probably about 9. We got it in there. So after we got that, our next task was the flooring itself, which we used a good vinyl plank. I got the screws, the 3/4 inch plywood, in my vinyl plank from Lowe's. flooring wasn't too bad. I just realized I had to get an extra box. I got a little over the square footage I needed out of the box as I thought, but I did not take into account, and a lot of you know how to put flooring and you know what I'm talking about. You're going to have cuts, a lot of waste when you're doing flooring. So what got me is that I had to go buy another box, the last box, for one strip of flooring out of that box, for one piece out of that box. I had to buy a whole box, another $40 or $50 box just for that one piece. So that's how that works when you're doing flooring. So I took a few pieces and I put them in my storage unit because I doubt it, but you never know if I need a spare or something on this. Vinyl plank is pretty tough. Probably no reason why anything should ever happen to it. It's pretty resilient. Moisture won't get through it. It's pretty tough flooring, and it really looks good. It's what they call a Tybee Island oak, and in fact, I will show it right here. That's it right there. As you can see, really looks good. So it's Tybee Island oak. So we did the whole van, did the whole floor. It was one of the first things, excuse me, my hand. It's one of the first things I did before I did anything. We got the flooring in, and that was a big help because I knew that the cabinets were just going to set in. We were going to bolt them in. The bed frame was going to bolt in. Everything was modular. So we got that. So that whole process in 2 or 3 different times probably took us a few days, but of a few hours a day. If we probably could have put one whole day into it if we put 8 or 9 hours into doing it. So you're probably looking at about a day or 2 worth of flooring. Insulation took probably a total of about, if 2 people got on it, you could do it all in a day, probably. Stuffing that wool wasn't, it was just trying to get it taped up and all that stuff. So I couldn't really do a lot of the other wool without working on my wiring process and mapping that out and then putting the wool up because I needed to see where I was at, where I was going. So that was kind of a hard thing to decide what I'm going to do. So I waited until we put the ceiling panels in before I finished out the wool because all I needed to do was tape it up quickly and then get the ceiling panel in as we were doing it. So 5 minutes to get that set to roll, and then because we knew we were in for probably the hardest part of this build was the walls and the ceiling and some of the trim. It was some tricky spots. That was the biggest work of this whole build, to be honest. It wasn't the floor. The floor was tricky when we were doing the vinyl plank. There was a couple of challenges when we did that because of one thing that I said earlier. Nothing in this van is square level. That's your challenge of everything that you do, even with these cabinets. If you notice, that cabinet sticking out right there wasn't built like that. Those are 2 different IKEA cabinets bolted together. That's a top cabinet from IKEA, and there's a bottom one. I bolted them together. I didn't mind it coming out because it actually looked kind of cool, but I had to go with the contour of the wall that was coming up. And another cool part is I've got room up top to maybe put, like I did over there, I put Velcroed down totes or storage cubbies. A lot of options you can do there. When I was measuring today, I realized I probably could have put the AC unit up there, but I'm not going to do that because how I have to run those lines, it's going to be too long. That's a whole nother issue later down the road. So, but the flooring and the prep and all that, you're talking about, if we did all day for day in, day out, 3 or 4 days worth of work on that deal, if we wanted to do it. Like I say, if Clancy had more time and we were to really put what time we wanted into it, we could have done this van in 2 weeks, probably 3 tops. But that just doesn't always work that way. It took us about 7 weeks, close to 8, and we got it done. So next on my list was good old plus nuts. Now, if you go back into my build series, you'll see where I showed you how I put the plus nuts in, and I showed you that pneumatic plus nut tool. That thing saved my butt. I got that idea from a van channel called Captain Vantastic. They really don't do videos much anymore. They're a couple that's from Kentucky that's living out in Bend, Oregon these days. I guess they're still out there. I'm not really sure at this point. They may be living back in Kentucky for all I know. Or they may be back there right now in lieu of all this quarantine stuff going on. Hard to say. But anyway, They were the ones that turned me on to the plus nuts, and he used a hand tool, and I was like, man, there's got to be a better way. That is ridiculous. My hands would be killing me, and it would take me forever to get all these plus nuts in. So here comes YouTube. I'm telling you, YouTube University. These guys were talking about pneumatic plus nut and rivet nut tools. This particular tool I had does both rivet nuts and plus nuts. And just go watch those videos and you'll see how easy it is. The plus nuts took me probably, with the exception of a couple I had to do later because I realized I needed more. God, I think it maybe took me an hour just to get all the plus nuts in this thing. It was nothing. The plus nuts were minimal compared to everything else. So I need to go ahead and get them in and map them out to where I knew I was going to get my cabinets bolted in. So, but the flooring, people can argue on my flooring about why did you use flooring that you put in the house. It's my preference. Some people want to use linoleum. Some people, I've seen people, in fact, Casey Roman, if you follow her, there's another channel. If you want someone who's a great storyteller, and she has some great videos. She's funny as hell too. She built a van and she didn't put any flooring. She used, if you go to Lowe's and you see that sponge tile, they're almost like puzzles. They link together like little puzzles. It's like cushion flooring they put in daycare centers. You'd have to go see what she did. She put that in and didn't glue a thing. I mean, and that's the one thing I'll tell you is when you put anything in this van, don't glue it. Do not glue anything. There's no adhesive on this floor. It's a floating floor. You're in a moving vehicle and you want things to shift. If I would have put any adhesive on this floor, by now I'd have had a problem on my hands. Things buckling and shifting, maybe things bubbling up. It just doesn't work. So do not use adhesive on anything unless you know it's going to work. Don't do it. So, that's it for flooring, plus nuts, insulation. I'll try to get some links in for Havelock wool. You can find it if you Google it, Havelock, Havelock wool. Great company to deal with. They were tremendously helpful. The shipping was probably the biggest cost out of that. The wool wasn't. Those 3 bags of wool were only about $350. Now, if you live in Nevada or close to that, get in the car and go drive, and the shipping would be a lot less. Shipping was almost $300, $250, $300 because of the weight for FedEx. It's the only reason why it costs so much. Other than that, the wool is not that expensive. I mean, I'm telling you, I think if you go read up about wool, I think people need to be insulating their houses with that. It's really cool. It won't mold or mildew, and it's fireproof. Who knew? Like I said earlier in videos, you can't catch a sheep on fire and they won't mold and they won't mildew. Sheep are amazing animals. So, but everything I did in this van, with the exception of a couple of things that I just kind of discovered as I was going along, is watching all these van builds. It really helped tremendously. So with that said, I think the next video, because this one's a bit lengthy, I'm going to get into, I mapped out my wiring. Go look at some prior videos of me doing that and talk about that. I think I want to talk about what we did for the Max Air fan and some of the wiring. And I may talk about electrical, because we'll get into ceiling and walls later on that deal. So anyway, some of these videos are kind of reiterating what I talked about as I was going along in this process, but a lot of them is, if you guys have questions or anything I talk about, let me know. I'll clarify it. Anything you see in a video or you have questions that you want to build, I don't mind answering the question. Give me a message. Holler at me. Anyway, I'm going to jump off here. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.